Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to WX Live webinar number 142. Today we're going to be discussing basics of classes. There's going to be a very interesting concept. Andy's been talking about these for a while. Now we can learn a little bit more about them. So enjoy, everyone. It's all yours, Cowboy.
Morning. Morning, everybody. Glad to see everybody here. Okay. Been going across, for quite a while. We talked about classes, and every so often I'll get the deal out there of saying somebody had the epiphany that they realized classes were the way to go and things like this. So, I figure there's still some confusion since most of us grew up learning programming or became of age learning programming and learning more linear-based programming rather than class-based programming. So I've been kind of roaming around looking at different things, trying to find a not so goofy way to explain it as what a lot of people do, or make it so technical based that you know by the third, fourth word your eyes are glassing over and impressing you with every 25-cent word I know of the subject. So basically I ran across a YouTube video, which I got posted here, that kind of makes you realize that classes, or we classify things every day. We put things in containers, and we call things like chair, even though it's, an ottoman, or a stool or something like this, and we classify everything. So if we think about it as part of our lives and how we put things into buckets or put things into classes and classify things, then it may be a little bit easier to understand. A little bit easier to kind of get your head around and start moving forward. I know we've all heard of polymorphism, objectification, all this kind of stuff. We're going to make this real simple. Now, I'm not going to say that I need to be the next professor of class development and software development at the local college by any stretch of the imagination, because I get irritated over students anyway. But this is one approach, one method, one way that I understand it, and hopefully it may trigger something in your mind that helps you as well. What does it do? We classify everything every day. We say, go get the chair. We don't say, go get the chair that is short with 4 legs and the 3-legged stool over there. We say, go get the chair. What is class? It basically is a combination of objects that are similar or processes that do similar things. The things that we go into from one aspect is to say, go over there and get me a cup of coffee. Well, okay, so if I go get a cup of coffee, well, that entails several things that I've got to do. But it's all in the same class, basically. Okay, it's all in the same area. But it contains a lot of the different instructions and processes it takes to walk over, pick up the pot, pour the coffee into your cup, put the pot back, get the cup, drink the cup. Those are all processes of a class called go get a cup of coffee. So, in saying that, understand it from that standpoint of something that's similar, and then you can kind of put your head around the same thing when you start getting into classes inside your program, because that's what it does. It provides a set of instructions, a set of processes to manage your application of your program. That's what it does. Now, does everything belong in one class? No. You separate the classes based upon the things that you want. What do they contain? Well, they contain what they call members, which is basically variables. These are things to either store or return you pieces of data. That's what they are. They also contain methods, which is your processes and your functions to accomplish things, like pick up the pot. That is a process or a method. That's to reach your hand out, grab the pot, pick it up. okay? And it manages the data. So, you know, one of the things I say is go through this little YouTube. It's a little bit brainiac talking about, you know, Aristotle and them, but it's the basis of how the original classes were developed and the class methodologies were developed. So it's something to read over. The second thing that we're going to kind of go through today is that I've kind of gone out there and discussed out there a repository. Pete uses one, I use one. I'm sure there's other ones out there that uses them as well. And what is a repository? Well, it's kind of like a bucket that we sit over on the side that holds all of our base stuff, things that we use constantly in each program, things that we have, you know, that we pull over and copy and use and share between programs, like licensing, app management, business rules, our base classes of our file manager class and our global classes, standard templates for controls of the add, change, and delete and the save control. Standard, say, if you're in a business, you have a standard set of windows or reports with the headers and the other stuff that you use. So when somebody creates a new program, they get that in there in order to start off with. Standard global procedures, like for your error handling routines and things like this. So you can say that, okay, I wrote it there. I don't have to rewrite it every time, because what is the object of programming is not to write every line of code, but to reuse every line of code that you can in order to speed up your development cycle to provide a product that is as stable as the first time you got it right. Simple as that. So we use a repository to say, this is something that I use and I'm going to use in multiple programs. So we copy it over there and we share it from there. The only things you can't share is some of the templates, standard global procedures, and some base windows. We copy those in, but they're there. All the classes you can actually share between your applications, but you have to think about which ones you want to share and which ones you don't. Okay? And we'll go through that repository today to kind of start setting up some of these classes we're talking about developing. And we're going to start off very, very simple, and then next week we will take those same classes and we will expand upon them. And then the final week we will move into, you know, some little bit more advanced functionality in the classes, and then finally into the really wild and woolly stuff of how to use dynamic classes and things like this. So we'll get into some pretty high level stuff there. We'll look at things like the Nexmo class, where we take a web service that's out there, which is an SMS web service, bring it in, make a class out of it. The same thing that Pete's done with his authorized.net. He's made a class out of it. If it's generic enough, he could actually put it out there and anybody could use the authorized.net. You know, it's things like this that these are tools. These are tools you throw in your toolbox when you need it for your application. You can pull it out and use it, and that's what your toolbox is. It's a repository. Okay. So what does a class really consist of? It can be at least one of the top three and a couple of the bottom ones, but bottom line, it has certain sections that you usually use inside your class. One is private, public, global, properties, and methods. Give you a couple minutes with each one. Private, these are variables or areas that is private to the class only. You cannot access them out of the class. You can use a property to update them, but they're private within the class. They're basically, these are my variables I use in here. You can't have them. Public variables are variables that you can use by instantiating the class. So if I take a class called customer, and I say CUST is customer class, then any of the public variables I can reference by typing in cust period, and then all the variables will appear. And what does that remind you of? It's the same thing as you have in a customer file and hyperfile. If I type in customer and dot, I see all the variables that's in that customer. There's not anything different. If you really, really kind of take a look at it, the analysis is a class or a set of classes over your file structures is what it is. Global, these are fields and areas or things that you can update whether you've instantiated the class or not. And I'll show you what we do with those as well. Properties, the best explanation that I can give you on a property that I like it for, it's a way to dynamically represent the variables that you have in either your public or your global, or call a method, and return a single bit of data. Example, I have labels for name, address, city, state, zip. So what I do is, instead of creating a whole new variable that is a string variable that I format everything to produce that label, I create a property called name, address, label. In there, I format the fields like I want it, and then I have that name, address, label field anytime I use that class. I don't have to recreate it. I don't have to have a local procedure to redevelop it. I don't have to, in the label report, format it the way I want it. I just put the single control on the report and print. It's done.
The way I describe that to procedural guys that I'm mentoring is it's a function that I'm able to reference inside my program as if it was a variable.
That is true. That is true. The only difference is you can't send a parameter. So you can't send parameters to it. You can update the value, but you can't send a parameter.
Right.
Methods, those are the procedures. Those are the functions that you call to return either one or more bits of data or to set things up inside your program. They're basically procedures. That's all they are. They call them methods to go with the nomenclature of classes, but that's what they are. They're procedures that you use to manage things. So, obviously, it did not take me 30 minutes to go through each one of these deals, so everybody's in trouble now in the group that talked about that. So we're gonna already hop over to the repository, and let's get started and take a look at the repository. Again, the repository, we don't worry about the errors in it or anything. All it is just a flat, big group of items that we have in here, and I'm going to go over the different things, and then we're actually going to create a class that we're going to call things in here. If you can see, I'm going to change which screen so I can get a larger screen for you guys, because that'll help, okay? Just a second here. We're going to share screens differently. And nope, that's not it. I'm looking. That's not it either. Which one is it? There it is. Okay, you should be able to see that a little bit better. A little bit larger font and everything. So I got one screen that's actually a different size than the rest of them. So I'm going to use it. Basically, let me just kind of minimize this part because we don't need the error part anyway for right now. What we do, or what I do in here, is I have certain sets of screens that I use in a lot of the different programs, and I just copy them out of there. So I have a business rules editor that Pete and I a long time ago got together. I've got a basic logon screen that you can see. I got an FTP screen. I got a QBE screen. I've got a download screen for downloading patches and stuff like this. These are the different screens that I have. I don't have any base report or queries, but I do have a bunch of classes. I have the balloon tip. I have a business rules class. I have my management class. I have a debug class, default manager class, equates, error handling, file management. You know, I can go through a bunch of them in here. All kinds of things that I use different times for different programs that I may use and share with them the different programs to handle different things that I need to do. Like the Nexmo class there is SMS. FTP classes be able to run FTP management, things like this. It's already done. This is code that's already been tested. It works. I don't have any issues with it. So I put it in here, and that way I can pull it out anytime I want to, and I can rapidly build those sections in my code however I want. Now, there's certain procedures I have too. I have some global procedures, and I have some error management procedures. I want to show you those. The error management procedures handle each of the, well, looks like I deleted the wrong one, I guess. Got rid of it. I'll show you in my other program because I got it over here anyway. Global procedures has got an XML dump in it. Some of the other things I've got in there is a second. There we go. My error management is error handling, exception handling, some hyperfile errors, and some tracing. So I can go into the error handling code, and I can see all the things I have for handling my errors there. Exception handling. So if I have an exception, I can send it back and restart the program. I've got every one of the defined error codes for hyperfile is there, so I can test any one of those there, and I also have trace if I want to. So I have it everything. Okay, so all of that's there. Excuse me, I had somebody at the office holler at me for just a second. So these I keep here, that especially the error management, or at least I had them there anyway. Just a second, guys. Pete, so talk for a minute for I got to tell Dawn something.
Okay.
If anyone, whenever we get back to it, Andy had to step away for a moment.
I'm sorry.
If you have any questions, just post them in the Q&A app, and we will get those answered as soon as possible.
Yeah. If anyone's got any questions, that'd be good, because I was deep in thought and fixing something out, so I'm not sure exactly what we were covering.
Okay, maybe I can get back to this now. Let me see if he says anything else. Let me show you how I put stuff in here, since I messed up the error management in the first place. Okay, so if I've created something like the error management that I have in the other, okay, Don, I'm happy for you, that I had in the other system, then I need to create something in here that I'm going to use it everywhere. So what I do is I create a new set of procedure. This is my error handling. I'm going to create that. I'm going to save it because it needs to create the actual file for it. And then the great thing about WinDev is literally I can go over to my other program. I can highlight them all. Control C. Come back over here. And paste them all in there. So now I've got them all. Save that. I've now fixed my problem real quick. But that allows me now, I have all the error handling that I want for every one of the programs I want. Okay? Works out pretty nicely. I've got a repository now for every bit of the code that I want to use. The other thing that's in here is templates of controls and things that we have in here in our repository as well. You can see I have an add, change, and delete set of buttons. These contain all of the procedures for adding, updating, deleting, whatever I want to do with the record. That's what it does. Then I have the save and cancel type buttons, which is the same thing. It has the post and pre-save procedure, save procedure, and updating the table if I have a tables. I have the close and help. I have QBE buttons, a couple of business rule meters. The main ones I use is these first two, but those kind of set the stage of how I'm going to develop things. So I can put the screen together real quick because I've already wrote the code. Now again, I look at these things here, and basically what the save cancel is, or what the add, change, and delete is nothing more to me than a class that has a window attached to it. Because each one of these are methods that I call when I create this and put that on a screen. That's all it is. So everything in WinDev, in essence, is a class-based system. You just don't know it, or you haven't realized it as you've been developing in it. So how do we use all this stuff? How do we create a class? What are we going to do with a class? One of the first ones that I created was basically what I call an app class. The app class is the first one that you need to look at creating yourself. And what this does is basically sets up how you're going to run your application. It's all the information, it's all the items that you're going to use within your application that is standard, that you're going to do it all the time. Why not set up something that you can just add into your application and it's done? You don't have to do anything more to it. You don't have to write 20 lines of header code, things like this. All of that stuff is easy because, in essence, this, and I'm going to show you what I ran into in developing, looking at one other program that I inherited that somebody had me look at, versus what I call the app class. What they've done is they created a buttload of global variables. You can see every one of the global variables here. Every one of these things are here. And they go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. I mean, it's just all over the place. So you end up with so many global variables, half the time you can't figure out what's going on. So, again, we want to classify those variables. We want to separate them into their logical areas of things that has to be done within the program. So what I do is I create a program class. I use it as app dot. App is program class and allows me to set up certain variables for certain things. I may have a class for my global variables that I use within the system. I may have a class for my registration and licensing, which is what I have here. Again, I have a separated class for doing the uploads or the FTP access and program uploads. And each one of them are there. All I have to do is instantiate those classes, and I have maybe 20 or 30 lines of code to start up my program versus 400, 500, 600 lines of code to start up my program, and using global variables throughout my program all over the place. Is there a lot of difference between the two other than typing? You know, I instantiate class. I just set a few variables and I'm off and running. So let's kind of go through this class, and then we'll create one and set a few things to it. There is a private section here. You got the public section down below that. Here's our global section that we have, and then you can see I've got a couple of and I've got one method. There is no properties in this class. I don't need one in this class. What do I have in here? I've got the registration name. I've got the program license. I've got an install license. I've got a registration license. A license ID, whether or not that they're going to use MIDI or not. I got a machine license, the date verified, and the user ID and a registration path, both. Okay, is what I have in here. What am I trying to just a second, guys. The user ID allows me to trap the user ID. Now, here's the one thing about it is the user ID, I may not use it. I may actually have a login class to handle the entire record for the login. Okay? So, what we're going to do, the other part I have in here is a method, is I have an initialization method, which basically goes through the registry, setting up the registry values and grabbing the registry values to see if it was set. If we got all the registry values, if I got a license ID out of the registry, then I am fine. If I don't, I open up the registry. I open up the registration screen and allow them to register the program. How do we implement this? Fairly simply in our project code. All I do is go to the element code. Down here, I can say app is progress class. Now when I do app dot init, I've got the initialization. Everything's done. I can set my license. And tell it that my license ID equals whatever it is. That's for them, and they're off and running. Pretty simple. Pretty simple. Okay. Let's go through and create a class. And let's create our own app class, is what we're going to do. I'm going to have a new class. I'm going to open it up, but what am I going to name it? Well, let's call it program class, or let's call it app class. I'm going to create a whole new one. It comes up with a little framework that says app class is class, end, and that's all you got. What I do at this moment is I go ahead and say, all right, well, I might have some private variables, so let's put that in there. I may have some public variables, so we're going to put that in there. And we're going to do some global stuff too. That's as far as we got. So what are some of the things that we want to trap in our application? One is, let's go with the license ID. We're going to make this a private variable will trap the user ID. We'll trap his security level. And we'll trap his name just for the heck of it too. Okay. Those are all public variables. Now, how do we want to get that information? Well, we got a couple things. One is that we got to have a login, which you've already got the screen for the login. You remember, right? We got the base screen for the login basic here. So, how do we get that to work? Well, let's go ahead and create a method with this. So we'll save that. We'll go to the app class here, which is now right here. And we're going to right mouse click, and I'm going to go right there, and I'm going to say new method. Okay. That new method is going to be get login. All right. Get login. That is going to then do a straightforward, let's say you use Hyperfile for your login as an example instead of SQL. We can use SQL, but we'll use Hyperfile for this. And it's the same file I use at all of the systems. So let's go straight forward here. So I'm going to open the Win Logon Basic. And when I get that back, I'm going to do a hread seek first. File name is going to be my security. Item name is, I'm going to go after two things. Somebody may have to help me with this because I don't do this very often. Actually, we're going to do the user ID, password key. I believe that's how you do it. And that's going to be when this is where I take the user ID equals my Win Logon Basic. Edit email address, user password. Equals edit password.
You need you need square brackets there, Andy.
Right here?
No, before your next comma. At the very end of your hread seek. Now put a square bracket. When you're doing a compound key at the end, you do it after the comma.
That's what I thought. I was fixing to do that. I was wondering what you were talking about.
No, you were putting a quote.
Oh, that's right. There.
Yeah. When you're doing a compound key, you're basically passing in an array is what you're doing.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. Of course, we're going to get errors because I don't have a security file or an analysis in here. This is a repository. So I've got that right there. And I finish it off. Notice I don't do much this. If okay. So setting up that method, all it does is says, okay, I'm going to open up the deal, let them put in their user ID and password. If get the two, go right, do an read seek first directly to the database, and then if that's true, you're done. And I've already put in the two things. And the other thing I want to do here is, I'm sorry, we got to add in the name stuff in there. So let's say we've actually, and we'll actually go ahead and do this as a property too. So I'm going to go in there and say user name, user F name instead, for first name, and user last name is last name. Or I'm sorry, string, dummy. Sorry, I get a little bit off now when they start hollering from the work. Now my train of thought's kind of gotten goofy. So I got the first name and last name of the user, and what I want to do, let's also do his initials. And let's say I want to have his first name and last name together as a property. So I'm going to right mouse click, go to properties. I'm going to create a property. There's a couple things with this when we look at the properties. You can see I've got user and last name, first name, whatever it may be. I'm going to click that, but I'm going to say user name is the property. What do I want to do? It's going to be public, but I don't need to write to it. I only need to read it. So I'm going to turn off the write portion, and then I'm going to click this and be done. So you notice it still puts a second procedure in here. That's a bug they have. You have to delete it. Okay? And then you can move forward. So I can take the user first name and last name with it. And now anytime I reference that, it will be Andy space Stapleton is what it would be every time. So when I'm working in the program, which we'll see here in a minute, all of that will be straightforward. Let's go initiate this and see how we would do it in the code. Again, I'm in the code. I'm going to set up the app. Whether you do it in the app code or you do it in the main window code, either one works is fine. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is now we go app is application class. App. What I'm going to do now is if not app.init, what am I missing here? Oh, get login, that's why. Duh. Get login. Then I'm going to say info. Invalid. Login. You're out of here. And end the program. Now, obviously, you may want to have a few other things in there, one way or another. I do not know why people, after I told them I was in this thing all day, will not. Excuse me, everybody. I apologize for the interruption. So, by setting these two variables alone, by setting the application class and calling the get login, I end up straightforward. I've already got a program. It's already ready to run. Get login call, if I hit F2 on there, goes straight there, does the read seek first. If I get it, I get back a true, and I'm able to continue. Everything's able to move along without a problem. Okay? So you can create classes to do just simple functions, things that you need that you're going to do all the time. Your code becomes solid. When you call it, you know it's going to work every time. If you're the head of a development environment and you give the class to somebody else to use, you know that whatever they use is going to run correctly every time without an issue. Okay? So you can easily get around this situations of having all of this code out there and working with it. Can you do even further with this? Well, You can. The application class is one thing. Let's go to a security class and start looking at what we can do for a security class. And be very straightforward with this. We're not going to go into the abstracts and things like this, but we're going to create a little bit of class called a security class that's going to utilize multiple methods in order to get the login, list up everybody with security, manage all the security records, things like this. So we're going to do several things, okay? And this is going to be really simple, and then we're going to expand upon this and separate out the pieces next week is what we're going to do. And I'll provide the complete repository, and hopefully people will not interrupt me next Friday. So, security class. The first thing we need to have is what do we have as fields within our data structure and our hyperfile. Well, we got the user ID, we got the password, we got user ID, password, name, say department, and since date. So we have an enter date. Pete and I and most everybody, we try to use array values in the system, and the reason for the array values is obviously it's faster. If you're using remote systems, all of your memory is being used locally, so you have to have better memory management within your software. You can't go out there and select 500,000 records and put it into your array. So you're going to be segregating, or you're going to be selecting from those and reducing the amount of data that you have. And we'll talk about how to reduce the amount of data that you're getting into your system, into your arrays next week. But you want to keep the amount of data that they're dealing with smaller, so that way it'll run faster and access the data quicker. Especially if you're dealing with like cloud databases, WebDev databases, WebDev itself, things like this, mobile for sure. You want to keep the amount of data going to it as small as possible, so that way it can manage the memory easier and not run out of memory. The last thing you want is to call you up and say, hey, you've run out of memory. Okay. So you don't want to do that. So let's go with this. We're going to create a structure first, and we'll call it structure. And all that is a way to store those fields. So we're going to have fname is string, lname is string, user ID is string, password is string, since date is date. Now, the structure that I have here does not necessarily need to have every field that's in the file itself. It also can have more fields that's in the file. It doesn't, in other words, I can merge two different hyperfile or SQL fields to get SQL tables together and create a whole new structure to come back and show information. So this is nothing more than the representation of the data you want to see on the screen or want to work with. Does not necessarily have to match 100% what's in the file. Keep that in mind, because we do that a lot. We will take a parent-child, like order entry type system or something like this, and we will pull data from the parent and show it with the child records at the same time. And we do that now by actually doing two different H reads, and we don't need to do that. We can actually put the two together and show it as one much easier. So I've got the security structure, and the thing I have to do now is I have to make that array. So I want to put a secure array secure is array of my SECST. Now, here's where we get into the private and the public. I've got my private, I got my public, My public is that array structure because I want to reference it outside the system. My private is the record structure. And that one's going to be dynamic, which we will go through that also later on. What is the other thing that I can do? Well, in my global, I don't necessarily need to specify the same hyperfile every time for security. In other words, I can literally tell it is security FIC on one or some SQL table on another. I can do either direction. It doesn't really matter what it is, and I can have it named different names by doing nothing more than saying file name is string. What that does is gives me a global variable that I can set up to say the file name for my security is XYZ or ABC or whatever I need it to be at this time. So now I'm more generic about the class. I'm not totally specifying. The only thing that I know is that I need to have a first name, a last name, user ID, password, and send state. Well, I can pretty much bet it'll always have a user ID and password. Okay? So now I've got this far. What do I need to do? I need to go get the data. So I need to create a method again in order to retrieve the data. So I go in the security class and I create the method, and I'm going to call it fetch records or fetch data. Fetch data is going to be very straightforward, and that's all it is fetch data, and it's going to pull back all of the records. Because my security is probably going to be less than 100 people max on the system, so there's nothing wrong with putting 100 records in there. So how do I get that all into the data? Well, it's real simple. So I'm going to do file to array. There are SEC. And here's the kicker. Since I named this file name, all I have to do here, put that right there. And what that will do now is store everything from whatever file I've assigned here into my array. I can literally come in here and call this security, and it'll be security every time unless I override it. Okay? Can you filter for this? Well, let's say you're running by departments, and I want to filter by departments. I've got a department right now. I can set the department for what I want. I can come down here in my method and say if my department is not equal to spaces, blank, then I can do an H filter on the file name. I use a lot of string builds, so bear with me while I do this. Now I've got a filter, and I've got it wrong because I forgot to put double quotes on the end. There we go. Now I've actually got a filter if I need to. And that'll bring back the filtered records from the H file. From this point forward, everything is in my array and I can manage it from there. So how would I go get a login if I've got everything in the array after fetch data? Now I need another method. And what I'm going to do here under this method, that's going to be a login method. Go back to my get login. Difference here is I'm going to pass two arguments to it. One is for the user ID and one is for the password. I'm not going to go straight to the file this time. I'm going to go into the array. And there's a couple of ways to do that. I can do an array seek, or I can just loop through the array and look at it. Either one will allow me to go either direction. Okay. I can sit here and do a index is int equals array seek. That is my AR SEC. I'm going to do it as linear first. What is my SOT values? I'm going to get two things. I'm going to go user ID, semicolon, and password. When I'm done, what is my source I'm going after? I'm going on after our user ID, our password. Put those in quotes. Yeah, I do. If index is greater than 0, result true, else result false. I can now check the login anytime I want. Okay? And I move forward from there. How do I use these two things in the code? Pretty easy. Same thing again. SEC is security class. This is where I would actually use a security class inside the window itself, but the code would be open my window, log on basic, and inside that window, we actually are going to test the values that we have. So I go here to the login. And what does it do? And we do validate or get login. Okay. Get login sends the email and password to it. And I'm rocking and rolling from there, because once I got the login with the email address and password, then I can go through, and if it's invalid, I can return to capture right back to the screen and start over with. Okay. Any questions so far? What we got here?
I don't see any questions on this side, Andy.
Okay. As we go forward next week, I'm going to expand upon the hyperfile, but in the third week we're going to get into SQL, because I do a lot more in SQL than we do in hyperfile, but I will show you even doing some select statements using hyperfile and how to manage some of the integration of two different bits of data. I've got an application we can use as an example. We're going to get into abstract classes next week. Okay. Abstract classes are classes that have no knowledge whatsoever of file data. It has no file actions to it. The CCS Manager class that others have seen is an example of an abstract class. All it has is fields and properties and functions, or basically methods, that take whatever I send it, do something, and return it back to whatever it's called from. It doesn't do anything more than that. So it doesn't have any particular capabilities of manipulating data except on the screen, or to return it back from the same array back, and but it will do no file management functions at all. That's what an abstract does. It does all of that stuff. It give you kind of 10-cent tour of the abstract as we get into it, but the abstract class, you got to kind of think of it as your functions class, or your functions program, where all of the things like make my name and together, sort this, do this. We used to make all these functions and procedures to do all this mundane work that needs to be done all the time, to sort this item or do this or show this on the screen, stuff like that. Well, that's what this does. This handles all of those kind of items that allows you to do the real work that you have to do without having to implement this within each class that you have. Where this came about was basically because of the UML functionality that WinDev has, and we'll get into the WinDev function, the UML as well. This works in marriage with that in order to give you everything that you need to be able to run the programs with it. Okay. So next week we're going to get into the abstract class, all the different pieces of it, developing your own abstract class, which we'll have it as what I call kind of a global functions class is what we'll call it, but it'll be abstract that you can include in with anything that you want. We'll create one for, like doing the name address kind of stuff, different pieces and things like this. I got a few examples that we can use for that. Then we'll get into the CCS file manager class and the abstract class of it and what it does. And then we'll get into the file manager class and what it does. And we'll generate UMLs and show how to get those working and what you do in the UMLs and the gotchas with it. And then we'll go on to the third week, I guess. If there is anything that you're having issues with or not fully understanding as we go through, if you will put it up there as saying, hey, I'd like to have more instructions on this, or why do you do this, or things like that, if you put it up there, that'll help guide me on what you need to understand or learn as we go forward. I'm going to post this repository and everything with it as a link that you can download. Not going to guarantee everything that's in this repository that works clean 100%, okay, because some of it's still in flux. I can guarantee that the CCS manager class, the default manager, the error handling, the file management classes, upgrade, security, and the controls do. The add, change, delete, and save, cancel, they do. Those I use all the time. The balloon tip, probably be fine. Debug class is iffy. I was working on it for trying to use the automated testing, and so that's got some still things to do. The FTP class will work. Global variables I don't hardly use anymore. Nexmo class does work. The Project Pro API, you won't need it unless you're into My Project Pro, so you can pretty much ignore it. XML dump class, you can use it. That just dumps XML is what it does. So that's kind of where it is. If you have any questions about this when you get it, feel free to post it up there on the Google Plus forum. I will answer them, or Pete, because we basically use a lot of the same stuff in here, and some of these classes are things that he's put together. And we'll be glad to kind of explain a little bit. They are free for you to do whatever you want to do with them, except sell them. Okay? We won't allow that. If I see it out there that when somebody's trying to sell the stuff, no matter which country it is, we'll come down on you like a ton of rocks. Okay? Other than that, that's about all I got for today.
All right,
Again, apologize for the interruptions, though.
That's no problem. Hey, it's almost exactly 1 hour. So I don't see any questions out here, so if no one has anything else, the last words are yours, Andy.
All right. Y'all be good or be good at it, okay? Talk to y'all later.